Cash flow is the number one reason why people are broke today. If you ask me my views about how things might progress in the UK in the next 5 to 10 years, I think things will be very difficult. This month alone, you have your council tax go up, you have your water bills go up, you have your energy bills going up. Everything's going up way past RPI inflation, not just CPI, RPI inflation. People's incomes aren't rising as much. So there's this squeeze. It's almost inevitable. So it's like people are getting poorer. On average, a black household has 10% the net worth of a white household in the UK. Why is that?
Welcome back to another episode of the PBK podcast. Now, today I'm joined by Ken. How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. One part of the Humble Penny.
Yes.
Award-winning best-selling author, featured in, a plethora of magazines. We've even seen you at 10 Downing Street.
Yes.
You've been in the space of financial literacy for how long now?
We began the Humble Penny in 2017. So it's been quite a few years now.
So pushing on 8 years now.
Yeah.
What was it about financial literacy and starting the Humble Penny? Why was it important to you?
It was important because I used to work in the investment business and I began doing that in 2006 and worked my way up to become a chief financial officer for a venture capital business. And in that space, you spend a lot of time with, high net worth, super high net worth, billionaires even. I'd be in a meeting and someone over there could be worth £5 billion and what have you. But then I'd come out the office, go for lunch, and I'd look out the door. There'd be somebody on the floor begging for some money. It's a clear, massive wealth divide in this country. And for some people, they've figured out the way to creating financial security for themselves. But a lot of people are really struggling. So for me, there was a conflict. And that conflict was, I'm in a space where there's wealth everywhere. Wealth is flowing everywhere. People are raising millions, tens of millions. But in reality, in and around my life, with family, friends, strangers, people are struggling. So that was almost the thing that activated a desire to start something. I didn't know what it would be called. My wife and I were brainstorming, and it became what we called the Humble Penny, to share our own story. And hopefully people could relate to our background, our different aspects of our journey, and hopefully it might help them improve their finances as well.
Do you think a lot of people have a poor relationship when it comes to money?
I think relationship with money is one of the most overlooked aspects as to why people are struggling financially. A lot of the time we think it's just about knowledge. We think it's just about financial literacy. But if you dig a bit deeper, it's about behavior. It's about habits. It's about what is your relationship with money? Where did it begin? Did it begin with your grandparents? Did it begin with your parents? What's it like with yourself? What's it like with your partner? What's it like relating to your kids? Money we can all connect with. We don't talk about it. We exchange it every day. We use it digitally or cash. But for a lot of us, that relationship is pretty poor. So I think that's, obviously, if you think about a root cause, that's where it actually begins in terms of sorting things out.
I think it's really interesting you mentioned about like where it comes from. Because I remember one of the first things I ever remember was from my grandfather when it comes to money. And it's this saying that's always lived with me. Look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. And I think it is so important because I think a lot of people have this attitude that I'll start saving when I get rich. I'll start looking after money when I've got loads of it. But what I think people don't realize is if you can't manage a small amount of money, you're not magically going to become good with it when you have a lot more.
Yes, absolutely. Because I almost see having small amounts of money as training ground. It's preparation for a future of abundance if you are prepared for it. Because if you can't handle £100 or £1,000 or £10,000, you'd really struggle if you won the lottery.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't know how to make your money work. You wouldn't know how to manage your lifestyle and not suddenly go, hey, I'm rich, look at me, and spend it on things that don't create for you any value or any security or any future potential or even protection like insurance and what have you. So I think it starts with small, because what happens when you have money is your life becomes very complicated. You start to speak to financial planners. You start to think about insurance. You start to think, oh, what about wealth transfer? What about wills? What about a power of attorney? It becomes very complicated. But when you don't have a lot of money, you're just beginning, all you're thinking about is, am I okay this month? Do I have 3 months put aside? Can I pay my bills? And then gradually, as things evolve, you also evolve with that complexity that comes with wealth over time.
Within your book and within your teachings, what would you say are some of the things that you're surprised that wow people, or things that people look at and you just think, for you, maybe coming from a financial background, it's almost second nature. But for a lot of people, when you speak to them, like you just touched on the idea of having 3 months in savings or like a just in case fund. What are some other things like that you find a lot of people are not that familiar with?
I think there are many things. I'll give you an example. One thing that, when we did this, actually yesterday, we did a workshop, because we do these corporate workshops at companies for employees. And we often ask people to work out their net worth. And it's one of the most almost arresting things to do, because you're coming to terms with the true reality of your financial life on one sheet of paper. And firstly, people are like really scared, because they're like, wow, what would this net worth show me? What would it show me? Would it show that I'm actually not doing very well, or I'm in the negative, or I have net liabilities rather than net assets? But one thing that jumps out when we do the exercise is, and I've seen this quite a number of times, is where somebody has, let's say, £10,000 in credit card debt. First, they don't really know how much in interest they're paying, how much APR, but they've got 10K down in credit card debt. But let's say that's on the liability side, but on the asset side, they've also got 10 grand sitting in their current account. And you're thinking to yourself, hang on a sec, that doesn't make sense. Like, to me, it's an instant thing. It's like, wait, you're paying 35% APR on that credit card. Why do you have that 10 grand sitting there in your current account doing nothing? And then the penny drops. So this literacy aspect comes because for a lot of us day to day, we're just busy doing life. We're working, we're looking after children, we're paying, we're just doing what we're doing. But it's not until you sit down and get closer to money. You're not running away from it. It's like in a real relationship. You're like saying, hey, let's talk about this. You're getting closer to the numbers. It's not until you're getting closer do you then realize, well, there's something not quite right here. I'm funding someone's balance sheet, the banks, the credit institutions. I'm funding them when I have 35% APR. But in reality, no one's funding me, because my money is just sitting in my current account. Why don't I just offset these amounts and get my place to a net positive position? So things like that start to jump out when you stop being afraid of that relationship with money. It doesn't trigger you. You're okay to say, you know what, like, I'm willing to talk about money. I'm willing to actually say, I'm not that great at these areas, or I have certain blind spots, and I'm open to learning about them and shifting my money habits.
I think it's really interesting. You touched on, obviously, the idea of people just wanting to see it. Like, it's the idea of like money under your pillow. Like, people just saying, I like the idea of regardless of the fact that it's being eroded by inflation, or you might have these expensive debts, people feel safer just to hold on to it. But I think the importance of having conversations around money, particularly within the Black community, a lot of the times, like, people don't want to have the conversation for fear of, how it's going to be deemed, or, how people's attitudes towards finances. But I think the more we talk about it and the more you understand it, the more there's the inverse, that your money starts to work for you as opposed to you working for your money.
Yes. So I think that conversation is absolutely critical. I'll give you an example, right? We see stats and we become numb to these stats. Yeah. So yesterday, I was looking at the stats that on average, a Black household has 10% the net worth of a white household in the UK.
Wow. Running a business is a constant uphill battle. You pour your heart and soul into it, working tirelessly to build something meaningful. And with interest rates rising, the opportunity to grow your hard-earned savings feels like a lifeline. As a business owner and investor myself, I know the frustrations of seeing your money dwindle while inflation soars. And that's why I was thrilled to discover Tide's business savings account.
With a competitive rate of 3.81 AER variable, it's a game changer.
Imagine seeing your savings grow month on month instead of slowly eroding. Tide's account offers instant access to your funds with no withdrawal fees and FSCS protection up to £85,000, giving you both peace of mind and flexibility. Don't let rising costs and economic uncertainty hold back your business. Take control of your finances today.
Tide is generously offering new members a boosted rate of 3.81 AER variable, where new Tide members receive a 0.77 AER boost on the standard 3.04 AER rate until the 1st of June 2025.
After which the rate goes back to 3.29 AER with no interest on balances above £75,000. It's time to give your business the financial boost it deserves. Check out the link in the description to learn more. And if you sign up with my code PropertyByKazi-Q1, you'll get £100 cash back when you fund £5,000 into your account in the first 30 days of opening. Terms and conditions apply. And for full details, visit tide.co/savings. Rate correct as of 6th of February 2025. Now back to the video.
So the question is why is that, right? If we don't talk about money, we don't address these gaps. Gaps just keep widening. You know, rich get richer, poor get poorer, they get wiped out. Lack of financial literacy, lack of ownership in assets, lack of knowledge on how to invest money, lack of the right skills as the world evolves with technology, lack of geographical freedom as the world changes and shifts. There's so many things. But if we don't sit down and talk about them, people quietly get poorer.
Yeah.
Your children grow up and they know better because you've not educated yourself and you're not educating your children to be better. So one thing I obsess about, for example, is the next 10 years. I think a lot of people don't even think about that. They're like, oh yeah, I only have today. And you do only have today.
Yeah.
But you also have to have some kind of a view about where might things go in the next decade for me? And what does that actually mean for me today? What does that mean? My children, my son just turned 12. Mary, a nice boy. Joshua just turned 12. In 10 years, he's going to be 22 years old. How might his life change? What does that mean for us as parents today? What should we be doing today? So I think a big part of that dialogue and conversation is talking about it from a community perspective, but also then personalizing it and asking, what does it mean for me? What do I need to be doing today to create certain shifts in and around my life?
And I think that's why, financial planning is so important, but also actually being open and willing to talk about money. Like I saw something that was really interesting, and it was like, if you ask a millionaire, billionaire, how much money have they got? They could probably answer close to the pound. They know how much money they've got. If you ask them what their expenses are, they know how much they spend on a monthly basis. So they know exactly where they are, exactly where they're trying to get to, and they can also foresee any issues because, in the same way within business, in personal life, like cash flow is king. If all of a sudden you reach a cash flow deficit and you can't pay your bills, now the creditors are closing in.
Yes.
So I think the importance of really understanding where you are financially allows you to plan for the future effectively.
Oh gosh, I can speak about this till tomorrow. One of my skills is I'm a qualified chartered accountant, and I worked in, various companies as a CFO or finance director. And one thing that you do is, in a business setting is you always have to think about every single month. There was a month-end cycle where you were always looking at what is the financial position of our business, the balance sheet, and what is the financial performance of the business from profit and loss perspective. And when you bring those together, you're looking at cash flow as well. I always feel like businesses that are run well are always anticipating. They're always looking at position, performance, cash flow, right? I almost feel like because we don't talk about money, or a lot of the time, a lot of people don't have that literacy. You're also not thinking from that perspective in your own personal life. So the net worth is the equivalent of the balance sheet in a personal life. The budget, looking at your income and expenses, is the equivalent from a business perspective, but in a personal life, it's also there. And you talked about cash flow. Cash flow is the number one reason why people are broke today. The inability to manage what comes in and what goes back out. Same as, by the way, it doesn't just apply if you're a low income earner. You could be mid-income, super high earner, footballer, boxer, whoever you are. The cash flow problem remains the main problem.
I've seen this, and I see it sometimes with, like you said, like people, celebrities, people that own really good amounts of money. And sometimes I see the lifestyle they live in, and I'm saying, going back to property, I look at it and I say, that house is going to be back on the market in about 2 years because it's great what you've done. You've got your swimming pool, you've got your music studio inside, but I don't think you really understand the long-term costs of having all of that land and all of that landscaping requirements, all of those heating bills, all of the the bills for water, of having an indoor swimming pool and an outdoor swimming pool, and really understanding that depending on where you want to be, you know, money potentially isn't going to last forever.
Yes.
Particularly if you're in somewhere like the entertainment space, the sports, like professional athlete space, you have a very short life cycle.
Yes.
So which is why when we start to look at, and by the way, we're going to get to some property stuff. I know it's a property pod, we're going to get there, but we have to warm you into it. But when people look at like longer term investment strategies, whether it be in property or other asset classes, it's really important to be able to create those long-term income streams alongside, you know, the short-term quick wins effectively.
I think that's critical. So if I look at, say, if you ask me my views about how things might progress in the UK, for example, say in the next 5 to 10 years, I think things will be very difficult. And I think a big hedge for the future is the ability to have control over your income, control over your investments, and control over your personal brand. I think those three things will be critical. And so when you talk about, you know, lifestyle and that sort of thing, you know, it's not just about what you earn, it's about what you actually keep at the end of the day. So one thing that's helped us on our journey is just this ability to make sure that our lifestyle is in check. It's very important, you know, not just seeing that every pound or every dollar or whatever you're earning has value and has potential, and realizing that, you know, you don't really have to work as hard as you might be doing if you are managing to keep more of your money that you're earning, and managing to do it whilst you still have the capability to do it. Because over time, people get sick, they get ill, they develop long-term illnesses. Their capability of earning declines if they're not looking after their well-being, which is actually a big part of the work we do, is really making sure we're achieving this balance between wealth and well-being. A lot of the time we talk about property, stock market, you know, gold, crypto, what have you. Everyone's so focused, laser focused on what they want, but what they need is to get their well-being in check. Because, you know, I can't count. In fact, I can probably say to you, in the last, say, 2 years, I've probably lost quite easily between 5 and 7 people, friends, family members. I can't even think of a single one that got to the age of 80. And they range in age from people in their early 30s to those people who are maybe around 70 years old. So a lot of the time you think, oh yeah, I'm focusing a lot on my wealth and building. But you're actually building wealth for somebody else if you're not looking after your well-being. So this is a key part of the puzzle when it comes to talking about money.
I think it's massively important to say, like, tomorrow is never promised. You don't know what's coming around the corner. I think just looking after yourself, particularly as, you know, we feel it. And I think life has a way of letting you know that, you know, it stuff's changing. Like if you hit your 30s, you realize, oh, the cold hits a little bit differently.
Yes.
The recovery from that jog isn't really the same. If you're a drinker, you can't go out and drink in the same way you did before and just bounce back. And that's your body's way of saying, listen, you've had your peak and you're on the decline now, but to slow that decline, you really have to look after yourself. One question I always get asked, and it's not really within my wheelhouse, but I saw you put some content on this out recently, and a lot of people are starting to look after their money. They're starting to see that they're in a position where they actually can save, and they've maybe started to build up savings, maybe their first saving pot of £5,000. For someone who's done that, what would you say is the most effective way to use that money?
I think when you have any money, it really comes down to what your goals are, you know, whether they be short-term goals or long-term goals. So what someone does with that sort of money will really differ depending on what that is. But if someone is at the moment in a lot of credit card debt or in debt more generally, then it's possibly the best return you could get on your money because it's guaranteed return, you know, pay off your debt. Like that's really quite simple. But if you've gone past that stage where you've built, you've paid off debt, expensive debts, for example, and you've put aside a bit of money for emergencies, maybe £1,000 or whatever, or maybe a couple of months of living expenses, then the question then becomes, you know, how do I put money to work? You know, it's easy to jump ahead and instantly go, I want to go into property, I want to go into, you know, stock market. But I actually think pausing for a moment to understand what role asset classes play in your portfolio is very important. Just to understand, because sometimes, to give you an example, some people are oversaturated in a particular asset class and oversaturated in a particular geographic location, like the UK or wherever. So just pausing and zooming out is very important. And then asking ourselves, well, what could I put money into, given my attitude to risk and given my current allocation to these different assets? What could I put money into that will help me go from this point to closer to where I want to get to? For some people, it might be actually investing in themselves. That $5,000 could be that they're learning, they are improving, they are maybe starting a small business that has that potential, maybe a digital focused business that's that potential to actually earn more in returns than they might earn in other asset classes, depending on what they do. For other people, it might be their first time that they're getting into the stock market. And for them, a sensible thing would not be to go, putting it all into one stock, because they could potentially lose all that money. A sensible thing would be to have it diversified into a global tracker, such that around 65% of their money is allocated to the US equities market, and maybe about 3.5% to China, or 4% to China, about 3.5% to the UK, and so on. So that way, even if you're in the UK, you have global exposure and your money is working for you. And if you put it into an ISA, you don't pay any taxes on that money, and it's protected from that perspective. There's other things you can do. You might, leave some of it, into an area that might grow it a bit more. You might buy, depending on what your goals are, you might buy a bit of gold as a kind of a doomsday thing. It all depends on what someone's asset picture looks like, which comes back to what you shared earlier about understanding where you are financially. And you wouldn't really know what that is until you sit down and say, what are all my assets? The things that have economic value and maybe create an income for me. What are all my liabilities? What does that picture actually look like? What are my goals? What is the gap between those, and what do I need to do next?
I think that's great advice, because a lot of the time when you hear these snapshots on Instagram and TikTok and all over the place, it's very generic advice in terms of you should do this. But I always say, the best advice is going to be very personal, circumstance led, where you are, risk tolerance, where you want to get to. So I think that's amazing advice for anybody who is looking at kind of effectively looking to balance their own books, so to speak. Before you actually start taking steps, take a real view of where you are and where you want to get to, because otherwise you could be taking steps in the wrong direction.
Oh no, absolutely. And I think we're more distracted today than ever before. We don't really, couples don't really speak to each other a lot. They're always watching something. Single people are, obviously always distracted doing things. I'm distracted. You're probably distracted in different ways. And I feel I think there's a need to take just time out for ourselves and ask ourselves important questions. If money wasn't an object, wasn't a thing, what would I be doing with my life? What do I value? So value-based spending, what do I really prioritize the most in my life? Is it security? Is it family? Is it freedom? Is it my health? I think pausing like that is very important. In fact, I think it's one of the most important things, because if you're clear on what's important to you, you give purpose to money, because money is just a tool. Money just flows everywhere. You can borrow it, you can earn it, you can spend it, you can invest. It's just a thing, a bit like a phone or whatever. But if you're clear on what your values are and what's important to you, it could be community. Your thing could be, do you know what? I really value community. I really value giving back. I really value volunteering. I really value sharing things that help people move forward. The thing is, it has to be unique to you. And if you don't make time for that, you just keep chasing your tail or chasing what everybody else is doing, and you have no purpose in life. And so money really reflects who we are who we are deep within as individuals. If you are somebody who has given thought to your life and given thought to, what's important in your life and important to other people, then your money will also flow in that direction.
Yeah. You touched on a few things that I find interesting. The firstly was the disparity of wealth between Black and other communities, but then also where people value where they spend money. From your sort of 10 years of experience in the space, do you see that, where do you think that comes from in terms of people maybe overspending on designer products and jewelry at a stage that maybe it doesn't make as much financial sense?
I just think that people need to understand that different assets carry different potential. So some of them are appreciating assets, some are wasting assets. I think when you come from a place of lack or a place where you've grown up without a lot, whether it's culturally or whatever, you're driven by scarcity. So your mindset is scarcity based. And I faced this, I know, because I lived through this. I wanted people to see that I was successful because of the car I drove or because of what I was wearing. And what you find is that a lot of the time you look like you're doing well, but you're really, a few steps away from being broke. If you didn't have that job, if you got made redundant, you would struggle. So I think a lot of improving when it comes to financial literacy is about really understanding, like, where do I, what is my goal and where do I need to put my money for money to begin to do the work for me? What are the type of assets that are worth investing in for the life that I want to create for myself, say 5 or 10 years down the line? And I touched on the UK climate earlier. And if you look at the direction of travel, overall quality of life is declining in the UK. Costs are rising. So more important than ever, one needs to really ask themselves, I've got £500 in the bank, I've got £5,000, I've got, whatever you've got, how is that money you've got helping you prepare for a future that's inevitable, God willing, a future that's inevitable, which is that if you look after your health, you look after yourself, you will arrive at that future, God willing. However, with the state of travel, take a moment and look at, the forecast for UK GDP and look at the direction of travel of costs. This month alone, I don't know if you've had these letters come into your post. This month alone, I've seen like Virgin Media, I've had like RPI plus, something like RPI plus 3.5%. So next thing you know, it's gone up by about 7.5%. You have your council tax go up, you have your water bills go up, you have your energy bills, going up. Everything's going up way past RPI inflation, not just CPI, RPI inflation. So people's incomes aren't rising as much. So there's this squeeze. It's almost inevitable. So it's like it's happening before our eyes. People are getting poorer. Yeah. So now more than ever, people need to ask themselves, if this is what's happening and this is what's expected to happen, how do I hedge that? How do I prepare for that?
And I mean, look, you're very right. I said we mentioned off air that I went skiing for a week, came back to a pile of letters this high, and there was no good news in these letters. There was price increases from British Gas, from EDF, from the council tax, and across a portfolio, it adds up. And it's the importance of preparing. I think going back to the kind of, I guess, fake it till you make it look, it is interesting because I completely understand the argument of, you need to obviously kind of behave within the remits of your current financial state. And also you've got assets that return a good return on investment versus those that are decreasing. But I think one thing from conversations I'm having, particularly with, my Gen Zers, because there's such a propensity to make money potentially through an online business, and it's all about perception. People find that there's actually, even though they're buying these depreciating assets, because people buy into the brand, the lifestyle, the perception, it actually aids them from a business perspective. So they can almost put a non-tangible value on buying, on investing in themselves effectively, I guess, through perception.
Yeah, but you see, I guess this is where you have to really question quite what you see on the internet.
Exactly.
Right. So for me, I think it's important that the work that I'm doing personally is purpose-led. I don't really want people to look at me and look at the car I'm driving and for that to be their motivation. That's not my style at all. Exactly. I mean, that doesn't mean that other people shouldn't do that. I mean, that's people's individual choices to do that. And I get where they're coming from with that. But I just think it further adds wood to the fire about why the life online is just such a fake life. It's just so unreal that I think you need to question everything. Question what you see, question what you hear, and come back to reality. Reality is what that letter that came through your door. That's your reality, right? The reality is what is in your bank account. That's your reality. Your reality is your health condition. Your reality is your job or your business. Is it doing well or is it not doing well? Your reality is this shift in technology that's happening. With your reality is the political shifts in the world. Your reality is the fact that the stock market is tanking at the moment. And, it's expected to recover in the future. This is real. Your reality is that your child needs to be fed and go to school. And you need to think about their future. So all this stuff online, I mean, it sounds great and it looks good. But to me, it means nothing.
I think that's it. People have to remember the importance of the online side of things is that you're probably comparing your worst day to everybody else's best day because it's perception. Everybody else's best foot forward. So I think you do have to be very careful from a motivational perspective in terms of what you put online and also what you see and how you choose to, consume that information.
Because that drives comparison culture. If you think about it, it's a consumerist culture and it's a comparison culture. And this is what further feeds the systems of credit that we have. So people want to keep up, so they borrow from tomorrow to live for today.
Do you know the other day I saw that you can order Deliveroo on Kalana? That's where we've got to in this world. That people
there you go.
Deliveroo in Kalana.
Yeah, so and then it's the convenience culture, right? So all of this, it's almost like a melting pot of stuff, fueled really by looking at other people. Exactly. So I think, again, a big part of what set us apart, and, Mary and I did, if I just go back a little bit, I moved to this country in 1998, started from zero, nothing. So if in my generation, in a very short period of time, we became financially independent simply by going against a lot of what we just discussing just there, this consumerist culture, this comparison culture, which again comes down to self-awareness, actually, a key component of emotional intelligence. If one isn't self-aware and sees that actually, I need to keep looking at what other people are doing, then they're pretty much always going to be led by the wind. They will never really know what they want out of life. It would just be all about, I saw that person doing that, and that's the kind of lifestyle I want. But really and truly, is it really what you want?
I think that it's so important because when we set up things like we have our own community with the PBK community, people are always like, oh, guys, why don't you post more lifestyle stuff? You were here, you were there. And I'm like, look, I don't want to attract people on that basis. I know the hard work. I know when I was doing 80 hours a week. I know when I was hanging the curtains by myself at 2 a.m. I know the graft. So I don't want to present this get-rich-quick scheme. It's very much a case of, in this world, you get out what you put into it. And I think you want to work with people that have that, that same ethos. But you just touched on something, which was, in terms of becoming, financially free. Because that's a term that, it, particularly on the social space, gets thrown around a lot. What does that look like for you?
So for me, it basically means where you've built up an investment portfolio or a net worth where the income from that outside of your home, if over time, the income from that can easily replace your monthly living expenses or your lifestyle living costs. So for me, it's about making sure that we maintain that, that our cost of living isn't crazy to the point where if I didn't work this week or next month or whatever, we'd still be fine. Things will still progress and carry on. So in simple terms, it's income from your assets, being able to easily cover your, the costs that you have in your life. For me, and that's where understanding your numbers actually comes in, because if every time your costs are going up because you've suddenly earned more money, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble, basically.
And for you being able to achieve that in such a short space of time, I know there's been sort of key components.
Oh, it wasn't short.
Well,
it took us a decade.
Relatively, though, to be financially free in a decade, most people don't achieve that in their entire life. It's generational. When we talk about generational wealth, so I think it's still something that it's not short in terms of the microwave culture that we have, but it's still definitely accelerated in terms of how long it takes for most people to achieve something that's so, that's really amazing, to be honest with you. So what were some of the key components that you think led to you being in that position?
I'd say the first is mindset. I think most people don't achieve it because it's not really, even in their view, it's not what they want. What they want is just pay their bills or go on holidays, and that's it. And nothing wrong with those. I love those, by the way. But
we all love a holiday.
But exactly.
Try to get him on a ski trip now already. That
exactly,
was the first thing I did.
I'm going on holiday this month. I love holidays.
Exactly.
This is like a love language for me. But for me, it was more than that. And a key ingredient was being a first generation immigrant. And by that, I mean beginning from a place of lack, a place of nothing, and wanting to change that picture. Some people right now are in a place of comfort. And that actually is a disadvantage because it doesn't push you. It doesn't make you want to get to that next place, depending on what your goals are. So I'd say first is mindset, really moving away from, I don't think it's possible for me, to, I actually think it's possible. I believe it's something I can achieve one day, and I'm prepared to do the work to get there. So that was kind of the beginning point. Then there's the question of why. Why is it actually important? Why do you want to achieve this goal? Why does it matter? I know it's a buzzy phrase and it sounds good. Freedom sounds nice, but why does it matter for you? What does it mean for your life? Would it be a game changer for you and your partner if you have a partner? Would it be a game changer for you and your children because it creates some generational work? Like, why does it actually matter? Yeah. So that requires a lot of self-reflection, thinking, writing down your thoughts, being clear, because otherwise, because you're going to be committing a lot of your life to this one goal. Mm-hmm. So once you're clear on the purpose, clear on why it really matters, then it's really about, okay, well, what does it actually then look like in reality? Because financial freedom, if I say, I ask this question a lot when I do workshops, like, oh, how much you need to think, what's your freedom number? People always say ridiculous things like, oh, I need 10 million, I need 50 million, someone even said a billion. Like, I'm like, do you even know how much £1 billion is?
Yeah, it's a crazy amount of money.
That's a lot of, so the number would then differ for everybody. For some people, it's not even up to £1 million or $1 million or whatever. So it's about working out, what does that number actually look like? A simple way of almost tracking what that looks like in terms of numbers is to say, take your expected living expenses, pick a number, multiply it by 12 to annualize it, and multiply it by 28.5. That gives you a sense. That's almost like a 1 minute calculation. Mm-hmm. Once you've done that, and the reason we multiply by 28.5 is because the theory is that if you invested your money and that money was working for you, say in the stock market, for example, and you drew down 3.5% of it, you would have around 28.5 years worth of money as a base case. Mm-hmm. And if your investment portfolio returned more than 3.5% over time and exceeded inflation, your money, technically speaking, you should never really run out of money. Yeah. That's the maths. That's the simple maths of it. So you now know the number. Your number might not be 10 million. Your number might be 950K. Yeah. Or it might be whatever. So the question then becomes, okay, if I drew down X amount, it will be able to cover my monthly expenses. So we now know the number, the objective. Then the strategy is then the next question. Is it property? Mm-hmm. Is it the stock market? Is it I start a business? Like, what is it? What are the approaches I need to follow to get there? So for us, it was different things, a combination of things. Mm-hmm. Or is it lifestyle simplification, which is a big part of ours, where we focused on trying to pay off our home because we saw owning our home and security around that as a big thing, as a couple raising children and that sort of thing.
Talk to you about that, because you decided to take the step to move out of London. When was that?
2012.
2012. Mm-hmm. So quite early on. What was it? Why did you decide that?
Because London's too expensive.
And do you think, I remember having this conversation, I can't remember who it was with, and they were like, a lot of us are just too entitled, i.e., this is what I know, I'm not moving. Regardless of impacts on finances, I'm just not moving, regardless of how it's, affecting me financially, mentally. Why was that different for you?
Well, because I moved to the UK. I've moved countries. Like, moving is just moving. Like,
that was around the corner, basically.
Yeah, you move because you move. You move to suit your circumstances, to suit where you're at. And for us, I didn't really want to be indebted for 25 years, paying off a house or whatever. Mary, my wife, and I said, we've seen our parents do that. Mm-hmm. No thanks. We're going to do something different. And I don't care what anyone else says, whether it's like, oh, it's a dumb thing to do or whatever. Like, people can say what they want to say. For me, it's about, what do we want as a household? What level of freedom do we want? And what does that actually look like? And that will be different for everybody. Mm-hmm. For some people, they don't need to do that. They might do something else. But you need to make it suited to your personal circumstances.
I love that. I love that. And I don't think we hear that enough. Because look, I've got my own attitude towards property because this is what I do and that's my vocation. But I think it's so important to make sure whatever it is that you do work for you to achieve your goals.
Yes.
Too many people I think have that shiny penny syndrome, just even when it comes to ideology. So if you're listening to this and you're giving some amazing, but make sure it works for you. And if you're listening to me, also make sure it works for you, because what you're saying works perfectly for you to achieve happiness.
Bro, like I'm living the best life I could really live for me, right? Because like I have time freedom, I have financial freedom. I have freedom of purpose. I have freedom of health. I have my family. I have my beautiful wife. I have my kids, and I'm content. Like, I choose what work I want to do. I came here because I wanted to. Like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Appreciate
this
having
is
you here.
this is like such an important thing. But that's because I chose to design this life in the way it is. Yeah. I could have chosen to do something else, you know. And by the way, paying off a home doesn't mean that I don't invest in property or in other asset classes, because it's about risk. It's about understanding that these are really asset classes.
Before we get to the other types of investments, talk to me about actually the process, because for a lot of people that just sounds crazy. How do you pay off a home? Paying off a home.
Oh, okay. Well, so when we bought our home, it had the typical term of a mortgage, 25 years.
Yeah.
And
Which for a lot of people is now 35
yeah.
years.
In fact, 25% of under 30s now buy for 30 years and beyond in recent stats. And we signed, we're like, yay, bought a house. However, we bought the house intentionally outside of London because we wanted to borrow a lot less money, right? Because that money is real. It's not monopoly money. It's like actual money you borrowed, right? So we would then thought to ourselves, well, actually, what could we start to do to change this picture of how much we've borrowed and the interest rates we were paying? And bear in mind, when we started, interest rates, this is 2012, we're not, we're in that stage where interest rates were
Coming
much lower than they are today. And one strategy we focused on was actually trying to overpay with bits of money here and there from pay rises or side hustles or managing our lifestyles. And it was a stupid thing to do to some people, you know, logically speaking, because like, why would you overpay a mortgage that is at a, relatively speaking, a lower interest rate? But again, this is where your self-awareness and your goals comes in. We understood what we were doing. We understood that if we paid this thing off much earlier than most people could ever dream of, that means that every other money we have gets invested in so many other different ways. We have the option of choosing different career options or doing whatever we wanted to do. So for us, it was okay. So the process is, bought the house, start paying our mortgage normal, start working hard, leveling up. I went to, around that phase of life, 2012, our first son was born in 2013, second son was born in 2014. I was working a lot, working many hours, leveling up in my career. So was my wife. I went to Cambridge, did an exec MBA, you know, started learning about business, even more so, whilst leveling up in my career. And obviously by doing all of that, your income's growing a lot. And by the same time, our lifestyle was actually pretty flat. In fact, we were living on one income. So a big part of the process was then, we got this other income. What do we do with it? Pay off, overpay on the mortgage, kept overpaying. Started small, £100, £300, £500. At one point, we started overpaying by more than £1,000 a month. But that was okay for us because we were managing our lifestyles. We're driving a car that, you know, wasn't really the type that, you know, the flashy type you might see on Instagram. We're managing other aspects of our lifestyles. We're not going clothing shopping, and we're just okay. Like I'm dressed now, you know, and we're still having fun. You know, we'd still go on holiday once or twice a year, but we'll pre-book them and plan them. But a big focus was overpaying whilst investing in other areas like the stock market, investing in ourselves, and so on. And we just carried on doing it. Carried on paying. Monthly overpayments wouldn't be enough. So whenever I had a bonus, for example, from work, a portion of it will go towards investing or overpaying. I went through redundancy, got redundancy pay. Some of that redundancy pay would go towards managing in the meantime whilst moving to another job. But if we had any excesses, it would go towards things like overpaying or investing. But it's about then carrying on, you know, because these goals that are worth achieving don't happen overnight. They take years and years and years of consistently doing stuff. And then, you know, years later, for us, it took just around 7 years, just a few months over, we paid it off. And fireworks didn't go off. I didn't get an award. Nothing happened. It was literally, you got a letter through the post saying you no longer owe any money. And that's it. You're like, okay, house is paid off. And I love it. I come home, I still say it till today. When we go for a walk, my wife and I always say to her, open door, I say, welcome to your mortgage-free home. Because from this home, a lot of wealth gets created. There's a lot of security and so on. But it hasn't stopped us doing other things. We invest in other areas. We invest in, you know, businesses, property, business, invest in ourselves. It hasn't stopped us doing anything. It's just one goal. But we've done it our own way. Yeah, there isn't one formula, there isn't one direction. It has been about, I think a key aspect of it has been mindset, and a key aspect has been keeping our lifestyles simple. We don't have an expensive lifestyle. I'm not interested in what other people are doing. My wife and I, we just do our own thing. Yeah. And if you keep your costs sufficiently, sensible, and your income's growing, you find that you have quite a lot to work with. And with that, you're in a powerful position. You can invest in different places.
Were there any penalties for early repayment or
Of course there are. There's always most mortgages have a 10% early repayment charge, but there are windows you can overpay. So first of all, 250K mortgage as an example, let's just pick that number randomly. 10% is 25K of overpayment. That's more than $2,000 a month, right? So most people can't even overpay 10% in a year. However, we found windows. So for example, when your mortgage deal is up, you can do much bigger overpayments. Or one of the things we did was just to get a product without one. Just ask your broker. It's the same lenders. It's just a specialist product. They can get your product that doesn't have an overpayment cap on it. They exist. So that means there are no penalties for you in that scenario. So we had a variety on the journey. One that had a 10% penalty and one that didn't.
And I think it's just understanding fit for purpose. Again, knowing what you want and then finding products that align to that. And there's always going to be something out there, but it's if you don't ask, you don't get. Whilst obviously doing that, naturally, when you look at if you look at whether it's a buy-to-let mortgage, residential mortgage, when you look at the value of your property versus what you're going to have to repay, effectively you're going to see the number that you're going to save over that next 25 years. Yeah. And you see it's a massive number. But outside of that savings, you mentioned obviously investing simultaneously. Where would you say some of your personal best investments have been?
I'd say a big part of our investing has been in the US equities market. And obviously that's benefited us with, record low interest rates over time, and the global economy, the way it's gone for the last 10 to 15 years. So we really backed the US market. But obviously you've seen over time, things change, global powers change, and there's a lot of questions at the moment about the US market and where that might look like. So for us, that has served us really well. And but we are focusing a lot on more globally focused investments so that the money isn't just pooled in, say, the US markets. But even if you invested globally, say via a global ETF or index fund, about 65% or 62% is still in the US market because the US market is that significant.
Yeah. So the age-old saying that if the US sneezes, the UK catches
a cold. Yeah. So and the UK market only makes up about 3.5% of the global market from an equity perspective. So I'd say that's worked really well. I'd say investing in myself is probably the best thing I've ever really done because that investment has enabled so much. Whether it's my career outcomes, whether it's the business we run today, whether it's us writing a book, whether it's just my overall sense of self-awareness and confidence, whether it's my ability to speak or write or whatever, I think that's the number one asset class, which is just really making sure that every day I'm growing. I say to people all the time, I have the best job in the world because every single week I have to learn about new things. I have to understand how the world works. I have to understand how the world economy is moving, how the UK economy is moving, and I have to teach people about it. And by doing that, I'm growing, I'm expanding, I'm learning new skills. I have to understand technology. I run a media-based company. I have to understand how to run it and make that company run profitably. I have to think, well, actually, how do I move with the shift in AI? That for me is by far the biggest investment because with that, and paired with location independence, you can pretty much, you can do anything, basically.
That's what we look at. Realistically, investing in yourself can offer potential limitless returns. And I think one thing I've really loved about today's conversation is we're at sort of polar ends of the investment spectrum in terms of I'm probably very much highly leveraged in terms of what I do in terms of the property investment space. But I completely understand why also paying off, a mortgage and having a completely different setup would work for somebody, and I can almost envisage it working for myself as well. And I think that's what's so good about these conversations, seeing polar viewpoints in terms of different types of strategies. Really what I'd like people to do as a takeaway from this is do exactly what you alluded to at the beginning and work out what works for you, because there's no one size fits all.
Can I just add one thing to that? Just because I want to make this really clear, just because we paid off a mortgage doesn't mean we don't employ leverage.
Yeah.
Leverage is just a tool. Exactly. It's just a way of it's a way of enhancing the returns on your money because somebody else is funding. A bank funds you 75% on a property, you fund 25%. Your ROI is better because the bank put the money in, and it works out better for you. But you also accept a level of risk.
Exactly.
So I always say to people, when we talk about this in our book, we haven't touched on this, but in our book, Financial Joy, there's a whole segment on property investing strategies. And I mentioned that because, and they're based out of real case studies, actually. And I say that because property is something anybody can go into. It's about just understanding that you can't go into it alone. You need different participants. You need the bank. You need a builder. You need an estate agent. You need a team, basically, of people to do things. And you need to understand how investments work. How do you work out a return? Do you know that a lot of people don't actually know how to work out what an ROI is? How do you work out a return on investment? How do you actually work out what is the return on your money? So this is back to the literacy point. I think if more people understood that, it reduces their attitude to risk. It kind of makes them a bit more like, oh, actually, I think I understand it. Because then if you understand how that works, you can compare risks across different asset classes. You can go, wait a sec. If I go into this asset class, there's an extra 5% of stamp duty I now need to pay. I can stack my numbers and work out, here's how long it would take for me to make my money back. And then compare that to another asset class and go, oh, with that asset class, I put money in, I put it in tax-free, I just let it work. I don't deal with boilers. I don't deal with anything. I might let it work. And then you might then choose and go, which one do I want to go for? Because you understand it.
And I think that's so important. And that's why books like Financial Joy are really important, because the amount of people that I sit down with and just can't analyze a deal. They can't benchmark one investment opportunity against another. They don't understand annualized returns, i.e. the money you make in a month is really different to the money you make over 12 months. So I think, the purpose of books like yours are so important to helping people understand how best to manage their money. And because of that, obviously, we don't have the book today, but we're going to make sure if you are subscribed, if you have liked this video, we're going to give an opportunity for somebody to get a copy of that book. But we're also going to put a link in the description. So if you are interested in grabbing a copy, you can get that to you ASAP. For people that want to connect with you and learn more about who you are and what you do, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can connect with us, first of all, on our website at thehumblepenny.com. There you can access all our various resources. Most of them are free, but they're also paid resources for people who want to. You can also connect with us on our YouTube channel by the same name, The Humble Penny, or on Instagram at The Humble Penny. And I wanted to just mention as well, we run a sister brand called Financial Joy Academy, which is a membership platform where we are doing a lot of what we're talking about today, helping people really shift their relationship with money, improve their behaviors around money, and tangibly take action to achieving, these wealth outcomes, whether it's investing or property or career maximization and what have you. So feel free to check out that at Financial Joy Academy.
No, definitely. Well, we really appreciate having you on. Look, we know we spoke off mic. We had probably 10 other questions we didn't get through. Yes. So I know at some point we're going to have you back on to talk about the global economy, to talk about what it's actually like in the UK / leaving the UK. We've both got a lot of friends that are currently exiting. So we're definitely going to get you back on soon. That has been another episode of the PBK podcast. If you've liked it, if you've enjoyed it, please make sure you subscribe, and we'll be back next week for another amazing episode.